Today is the 10th of August, Monday. A lot is going on in the world. A lot is happening that some of our audience is already well aware of, and some that we will disclose as we go along. And we are very happy to do that, bring to our global audience news and information that is not available to many sources. Global media is comprised of independent media, people like us who would bring this information to you if they had access to it. A lot of them don't. We are very privileged to have it, and that's why it is our honor to bring this to you. And corporate media that doesn't want to bring this information to you. If you like what we do, please hit the like and subscribe button. Go to our Substack and become a paid member for the small price of $5 a month. And we will deliver these briefs to you twice a week. We are very privileged to have with us an honored guest, Alex Krainer. You have heard him before, and you have appreciated what he had to say based upon the numbers that we see, large numbers of people who watched him all over the world and had a great deal of very positive things to say about what they heard. Alex is a very knowledgeable person, deeply resourced, deeply informed, to talk about very difficult subjects, subjects that many people still do not really understand, which is the eventual and inevitable decline of the petrodollar. So I invite Alex to start the conversation, and if he wants me, I have personal direct experience with this. I'll be happy to share that with everyone. So please, Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Zulfikar. Always good to join you, and my warm greetings from Monaco to your audience, to our audience.
Yes.
So the subject of petrodollar is something that I think that by now most people have heard about, but it may be vague or abstract. It's not a household item that everybody can understand, and it's not something that you can see because it's not just the dollar bills. It's the whole system behind it. And as a as a young market analyst and hedge fund manager in my through my life, I've done quite a bit of research into this. I understood how it was created. It was basically when the Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971. When we're going on today's 10th August. On 15th August, it's going to be the anniversary, 20 55th anniversary of Richard Nixon temporarily suspending the convertibility of US dollars into gold. And at that point, I think that people running the show in the United States knew that the dollar would collapse, that it would implode like every other fiat currency, meaning, currency that's being printed and put into circulation out of thin air. Usually, they have a very limited shelf life, and it always ends in high inflation and collapse. So they knew that they needed a plan B, and they already had a plan B, and the plan B was to back the value of U.S. dollar by crude oil, by oil exports from oil exporting countries, which is probably a unique case in history. So the suspension, the very temporary suspension of U.S. convertibility of the dollar was announced by Richard Nixon on 15th August 1971. And then a whole cascade of events followed that. For one of them was they knew they were going to deplete the host, the United States. So the imperial cabal, the people who are actually the ultimate beneficiaries of the Western Empire, of this imperial system, knew they were going to kill the host. So they almost immediately designated China as the next global cup, right? And Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger went to China almost immediately and started negotiations to build up China into the next superpower and to transfer the ownership of globalization's quote unquote, to China. That didn't work out, by the way, because the Chinese drew them in, but they drew them in not with the view to serve them, but with the view to behead the beast. And then another thing that they did is they went to oil exporting countries, principally Saudi Arabia, and they made a deal with them that, okay, so we want you to sell your oil exclusively in US dollars. And then pretty much everybody had to follow suit. So what that does is it creates a guaranteed demand for US dollars, regardless of whether there was any gold reserves backing it or not, because everybody needs oil. And if you need to buy oil, you need to buy dollars first. So that gave the United States the power to issue their currency practically at their discretion, and then buy the world with printed up pieces of paper. And the collateral that was backing this whole operation was initially the crude oil export from oil exporting countries. So the the added twists in this plot is that this is not strictly speaking a US operation. That is, it's not the result of some initiative by legitimate um, structures of American government, you know, the American representatives that people elect. You see the British hand in practically everything that is being done in the world today. The United States only catches up when it's time to apply brute force. But long before it's time to apply brute force, uh, you see NGOs move in. You see uh, intelligence assets and diplomatic assets moving in into places like Syria, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, uh, Myanmar, Ukraine, all of these places, and they play the principal role. And if you read their papers, if you read their semi secret reports, things published by think tanks like the Chatham House, like the RUSI, which is Royal United Services International Institute, sorry, Royal United Services Institute, by think tanks like the Policy Exchange and so forth, you see that everything that's happening in the world has already been scripted by people who signed those documents. These are practically all British. Um, Before Trump was on board with them, willingly or unwillingly, he was an enemy, and he was attacked, among other things, with the Russiagate affair. If we look into the Russiagate affair, uh, practically everybody who wasn't a member of the Democratic National Congress, DNC, was a British agent, was a former asset or current asset of the MI6, and everything was being coordinated by people like Richard Dearlove, who is a former head of MI6. Um, Christopher Steele was the errand boy who had the most visible role, but there was at least half a dozen former British intelligence assets involved in creating the Russiagate affairs. And so the reason why this is relevant, because all these things cost a lot of money. Meaning, you know, when you have all these diplomatic fronts, NGOs, charitable organizations, private contractors who move into Afghanistan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Lebanon, Syria, every crisis flashpoint that's being actively destabilized in the world today, you see a lot of British companies, NGOs, and so forth moving in and preparing the terrains for many years before anything really happens. So that all costs a lot of money. Now, if you look at the British economy, it's practically disintegrating. It's not growing. They have high inflation. The government finances are absolutely catastrophic, and so yes, and then they don't have an army practically, right? They barely have an army. They barely have a navy. So how do they get to project power? How do they get to be constantly involved in every theater in this world as a failing state? And the answer is the petrodollar system. And so, what we see happening today is extremely relevant because, for once now, Iran has decided to wield their most powerful weapon, which is control of the Strait of Hormuz, through which an estimated 22% of global crude oil supply was moving every day. And so now the Iranians are in the position to say, right, we're going to let the oil flow, but it cannot be denominated in US dollars. And they've already signaled this intent. And I know that I don't know if these were secret contacts, but they were not discussed in the Western press. That they contacted the representatives of the European Union, and they offered them to trade oil for euros, which is not great. Europe is not a friend of Iran, but it strikes at the root of the petrodollar. It chokes the petrodollar, and with choking the petrodollar, it severely cramps the ability of this imperial juggernaut to fund itself, to fund its operation, because they also spend a lot of money on paramilitary forces, on jihadis, Al Nusra, Al Qaeda, HTS, and so forth. All of that stuff costs a lot of money, and it's funded by somebody. It's not money is not just dropping out of the skies. And so their handlers are almost invariably British intelligence and diplomatic assets, and I suspect that a lot of funding for all of these operations that are still to this day shaping the global order are flowing through the petrodollar system. And in fact, for some of them, we even know for a fact that this is what happens. Um, they are extremely good at concealing their game. So, you're not going to see a transfer of a large amount of money from the British Foreign Office or British Treasury to HTS or to Al Qaeda or something like this. This doesn't really happen. But what they do have is an extremely elaborate system of a network of uh, banks, money laundering banks, non government organizations, diplomatic missions like the British Council, uh, charitable organizations, and so forth, which then do channel money to those ends. And how suddenly these burgeoning amounts of dollars became available in the world, completely outside of the control of the Federal Reserve System and the United States Treasury. It's completely illegal. It should be completely unconstitutional as far as the American legal system is concerned. But nevertheless, it is allowed to exist because it's so massive that they can buy politicians, they can buy judges, they can buy spies and intelligence assets. And so they basically have this dominant, illegal, mafia style system basically running the world. The Iranians today have obviously understood all this. And I think that so have the Russians and the Chinese. And I think that so have the Pakistanis, Turks, and the Saudis. And right now, I think that there's a gradual convergence of forces that is determined to destroy the system. Well, yeah, the Yemenis as well. You know, they also said, okay, fine, we're shutting off the Bab el Mandeb Strait, but we'll allow Chinese Chi- crude oil bought in Chinese yuan to exit.
What more can you say, Alex? You have provided devastating information. This is not news to people who have actually watched it. People like myself who had their hands in the creation of this monstrosity, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and not proud of that work, but I have to admit that I was part of the team that was sent to create this monster, monster, monster. Okay, monster, and this is not news to people like me, not news to people who have watched it grow into the abomination that it has become. And fortunately for us, we are alive to see it eventually being crushed by Iran. I mean, I'll boldly state, go out on the limb if I have to, that Iran will end up the victor. Iran will end up vanquishing this evil, malicious dragon. Iran is going to do that. And you can see that the United States, as we have said on this channel, uh, has no other choice other than to simply quit its campaign to keep on firing missiles that it doesn't have, literally doesn't have, from bases that don't exist. From my reporting, from my understanding, there are only three bases out of the maybe 30 that they had, and that are semi-functional. And they're semi-functional only with a small amount of strip of land where they can land or take off. Obviously, that will be gone as well if the kinetic actions continue. So the petrodollar is a stain on the face of the earth, and my bold prediction is that soon Iran will wash it, as will be as other countries lend a hand, most notably China, most notably this alliance of three countries that just took place. People are not understanding the significance of it, but because of my access to people who are involved in the creation of that, and what I hear and see, it is extremely profound that China backed countries, Pakistan, Turkey, and now Saudi Arabia are coming together in a very significant relationship. And the end of that will be the end of result of all that will be the U.S. will be diminished as a power, humiliated. Is already humiliated. There is no one that I know of who is a keen observer who does not understand that the United States has been humiliated by Iran, not by China, but by Iran.
I do know some people who think that. I mean, who think that Trump is playing this brilliant, flawless game, and that he's defeating his adversaries. But it's not Iran. It's like the European powers and the British establishment and so forth. But even if that were true, the war in Iran is real. The I think it has to be said that there is a certain level of hostility between the Trump administration and the British establishment and the former European colonial powers. That is true, but all of that has been, I think, put in the second plan by the war in Iran. And the war in Iran, as I mentioned to you, I read this 72 page think tank document published by Policy Exchange, which is called something like the British Iran and the British strategy, something like that. And everything that we're seeing unfold in the world today, in the particularly in Western Asia, in the Middle East, has been almost perfectly scripted by the British intelligence um, establishment, including the need to take out Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela before going to Iran. Even that was in that document. So somehow, this same network of power managed to maneuver Trump into this humiliating defeat. And of course, they don't care about Trump. They don't care about the United States. For them, it's just another proxy war. The United States is being used as a proxy. The glue that holds all this together is exactly what you and I are talking about today, which is the petrodollar, because it takes a lot of money to get all these people to do stuff for you. Like for example, you might need a couple of billion to bail Donald Trump out of bankruptcy, make him whole so that he can run for office. And then you say, like, well, you actually owe us a couple of favors, and we have all this compromise on you. So how about you consider the choice between silver and lead? You work with us, that could be very good for you and your family. If you work against us, it will be deadly for you and your family. So that might be that might be the way Trump was turned around. But I agree with you that there is no way, even if Trump was trying to do something more clever, even if there was some sincerity about his declared intentions to pull away from the Middle East, to withdraw troops from Iraq and Syria and from Germany, and like Trump has said a lot of things that sounded very good at the outset, but now I think that they've all been thrown overboard. And Iran obviously has achieved a strategic victory over the United States. And I think that the brand new alliance that was just announced 2 days ago between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, I've seen a lot of commentary saying that, oh, these people are again, once more, they've been co opted by Washington in order to defend Israel and so forth. I don't think that's the purpose of the alliance. I think that the purpose of the alliance is exactly to back up the eviction of the United States, Great Britain, and Israel from the region. Because what do all these countries have in common? Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. All three of them have been threatened by Israel. All three of them. Israel has massive ambitions against territorial ambitions against Saudi Arabia, which a huge chunk of Saudi Arabia would make part of the greater Israel. So, Saudi Arabia doesn't exactly have the power to resist by themselves. Israeli officials have been threatening a war against Turkey for months now. And before the war against Iran, we had Israeli officials on record saying that once we're done with Iran, Pakistan is next. So none of these countries have any interest in wasting their resources on defending Israel.
Good luck attacking Pakistan. They're
Yes,
going to need a lot of that.
exactly. But there is for them, the Israeli leadership is now acting in such an irrational way that they believe they can do anything. They can have seven front wars. They can add the eighth one and the ninth one and the 10th one. It doesn't matter because they're the God's chosen people. Everybody else is stupid. They can bring the big dumb giant United States to fight their wars for them infinitely with no restrictions. And so sky's the limit. We'll just kill everybody we don't like, and we're going to create the world that we desire, where we're going to be the ruling class, the ruling elite, and everybody else is going to be serving us. And somehow there are people who actually believe this, and they're very, very close to the seat of power in Israel. But again, I just want to connect again Israel to the headquarters of the operation, which is the city of London. Some people will say like, oh well, the Zionist Jewish donors in the United States, they have a lot of money, so they can influence politics and so forth. But don't Russians have a lot of money also? The Chinese have a lot of money, the Japanese have a lot of money, Arabs have a lot of money, the Indians have a lot of money. So how come this tiny little parasite in the Levant gets to control British foreign policy, ostensibly American foreign policy, German foreign policy, and so forth? How can that possibly be? We also know that the preparations for all this, for the creation of the State of Israel, go back to at least 1870s, and we also know that Israel completely was the creation of the British Empire with a lot of foresight, because the members of the Round Table that has now become the Chatham House, Round Table became the Royal Society, became the Chatham House, still one of the most powerful think tanks in Great Britain. Alumni of that organization in the 1920s or 30s gave an interview to the Manchester Guardian, and they said that, well, we understood that in order for Great Britain to remain a global maritime empire, we would need to control the Middle East, and to do that, we needed to seed that region with a, quote unquote, particularly patriotic stock. And that was, the code word for Zionist Jews, as opposed to Arabs, who are, notoriously disunited and difficult to control and difficult to wield. So they decided, hey, let's create a Jewish state. It's going to be our unsinkable aircraft carrier in the region, and it's going to be busy destabilizing the region in perpetuity, so that we can control all of the countries around Israel politically. And so that's been the reality even longer than the petrodollar. But it's been, that's the power principle that made petrodollar possible. And petrodollar is how we got the whole world trading in US dollars, and most of those dollars flow to money center banks outside of the United States through an elaborate system of money laundering, and these private contractors, charities, NGOs, and so forth.
Well, fortunately, it's going to come to an end, hopefully soon. But for sure, I will go boldly out on the limb and say it will end. It will end. And this is coming from somebody who was part of the team that was brought in to set it up, and unfortunately, took part in it, and not happy about that. Obviously, got out of
Well,
it quickly.
Zulfikar, just on a personal note, if I may,
Please,
I've the fact that you participated in that,
yes,
I think you shouldn't apologize for it, because decades ago, many of us didn't know what we were dealing with exactly. But then people who were insiders have always been able to provide the most valuable knowledge and understanding to overturn these systems as well. Because let's remember, like people like Edward Snowden. If you met him before 2013, I think he was KBR, a contractor working for, again, working for the CIA, but in a private capacity, because that's the architecture of power. They set
yes,
up these
yes, yes.
private companies, but basically he was carrying water for the CIA. But he was able to provide us with enormously valuable information about this system, and put it on record that what many people were branding as conspiracy theories were actually the reality. And the same is true for people like Russell Tice, John Kiriakou, and so forth. They were all inside, and there was John Perkins, the economic hitman. They were all inside the system because at a given point in time, they thought they were on the side of the good guys. They were building a better world, a new, a new order that's going to be kinder and gentler, as Bush Senior called it.
Yes, yes, yes,
But today, these same people know exactly what's under the hood. They know
yes.
how the plumbing is organized. So these, I think maybe that was the story of your life, your destiny to go through all this and to come out and to say like, well, I know how rotten this is because I took part in creating it.
Well, I can say that to the world. I can say that to the world. I've actually said it a few times. I'm old enough to have been recruited by the U.S. government to be part of a team to go to Saudi Arabia and to the other Gulf countries in the early 70s and to meet with very, very senior people in the royal family and their advisors, and to explain to them the great powers of American military machines and how good it will be for them to own it and become so powerful and be a part of the system that allowed billions of dollars to come back into the United States and for billions of dollars to be continually invested in the United States as advisors and contractors and all of that. But even somebody like myself who was in his mid 20s at the time saw quickly that this was a rotten regime. This is not going to end up good. So I resigned. I got out of it. Completely got out of it. And I could have made a big career of being in that system, but I changed direction and do what I do now. So yes, I'm happy to provide my insight of having seen all of this rotten roots taking place at the time that they were being planted, and it was a heady, scene for me, a young guy who was being wined and dined, and I mean I don't drink, and so not wine, but dined and being flown across the continent in private planes and so forth. But I saw this firsthand. I mean, not just me. I mean, a whole team, a whole crew of this, with the great blessing of the highest levels of the U.S. government. That these are our people. Talk to them, and they will show you blah 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 and so forth. I had until I mean, for a period of that time, I was part of the system development organization at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the A-10 aircraft. So I knew the war machinery inside out, and knew how to pitch the F-15s and the AWACS and the A-10s and all of that. And it was just very evident to me quickly that this is all junk. This is all garbage. This will never ever see the light of day in terms of providing any level of security. And we have seen that. We have
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
seen that. Nothing.
Well, yeah, I think that's very interesting because one thing that I've noticed through my research is that basically, as I tried to explain before, uh, their disproportionate power in the world rests on control of the petrodollar and the entire dollar system that circulates outside of the United States, uh, which implies basically that they make people do things for them by basically putting this choice to them. You can make a lot of money, or we can eliminate you. If you're
Yes.
in our way, if you're in our way, we're going to eliminate you one way or another. Whether it's through elections, through assassinations, or through character assassinations, whatever. They have a whole menu of methods. So they draw to themselves the most ambitious people with the least scruples, and then
Yes.
ultimately the way they control them is institutionalized corruption. And this is why they ultimately always fail, because they do always fail. For example, they went into Afghanistan 22 years ago, and the American administrators who were put in charge of running Afghanistan started realizing that this is a huge problem. And they said, if we don't eliminate corruption, we will lose Afghanistan. It's going to go back right back to Taliban. An American official, I don't know if it was exactly Paul Bremer or somebody else, but a prominent American official said that uh, corruption is number one recruitment tool for the Taliban. So the corruption of the ruling system that they installed was driving people towards Taliban, and it strengthened Taliban. It strengthened the opposition. And then when this was said, this comment that corruption was the chief driver of recruitment for the Taliban, another official said that, well, it's not that corruption is a problem in our ruling system. Corruption is the essence of our ruling system there. They acknowledge this because it's all resting on, paying people money, privileges, contracts, making them wealthy in order to maintain a certain system of government that's, cooperative with Western powers, but particularly with Western banks and corporations, to keep this flow of wealth always going towards Western banks. And that makes the whole thing very unsustainable and hollow. So it's like a wealth extraction pump that's very fragile at the same time. And so this we the most important thing that is changing today is that I believe that the Iranians, but also the Pakistanis, the Saudis, the Yemenis, the
Turks.
the Turks, they are starting to realize this, because what we had in the last few years was also the war in Ukraine, and everybody saw how the Western powers didn't hesitate a moment to freeze almost $300 billion worth of Russian assets in the Western financial institutions. And so, if they're brazen enough, if they're if they're ruthless enough to do this to the number one nuclear power in this world, then what is Saudi Arabia for them? It's nothing. It's a maggot that they will squash it whenever they choose to do so. And Saudi Arabia not only has hundreds of, more than Russia. Last I looked, they had something like 800 or 900 billion dollars in direct assets in the United States, but they also have these enormous sovereign asset funds. And so the combined assets of Saudi, UAE, Qatari, Bahraini, Kuwaiti sovereign assets funds in the West is something close to $5 trillion. Now, one thing that we can almost take as 100% certainty is that before the Western Empire fails, it's going to loot all of that money and take it for their ends. And I think that after Ukraine and after they did this to Russia, I think that, all these rulers, they might be corrupt family, they might be corrupt, they might be brutal, they might be ruthless and oppressive, but they're not stupid. And they see the writing on the wall, they see what's coming their way. So, the way I interpret this new alliance between Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia is Saudi Arabia deciding to pay protection racket to Turkey and Pakistan, because it's three nations
Alex,
where one,
you see behind my thumb?
yeah, because one of these three nations, two of these three nations are major military powers. One of them is a pipsqueak. So why would Pakistan and Turkey sign an alliance with Saudi Arabia? Like, an attack on one is an attack on all. So somebody attacks Turkey, what, Saudi Arabia is going to come to their aid? That's a joke. I think that the Saudis probably initiated this by saying, we're already screwed. We're going to get skinned alive. All our sovereign asset funds are probably, we're never going to see them again. So what we can do is, since you are all already, at least on paper, allied with the United States, you can become our protector. We'll pay you for it with these funds that are in the United States. So if we say, send us $1 trillion, Trump is going to say, no, 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 no. We're not going to send you $1 trillion. Why don't we send you $1 trillion worth of Patriot missiles that will deliver in 2046? But if Turkey or Pakistan say, send us $1 trillion, well, then the United States might have to say, okay, yeah, they're going to have to send the money. So Saudi Arabia gets new protectors, and these new protectors get some of the Saudi money.
Alex,
So,
a lot of nonsense has been said about this, but you have cut to the chase. You have cut to the chase and you have uttered the words that are the truest words describing what has just taken place. And I said this sitting in a position where I have actually listened to the deliberations between people who actually put their names on the piece of paper. So I am that close to the scene. Very honored to be in that position and trusted by them to bring some information here. And exactly what you have said is the truth. It's very simple.
yeah,
Saudi Arabia is
exactly.
buying
It's very
protection.
simple. And if you understand how the system works, it's not a hard conclusion to reach.
No, no, no. It is the truth. Alex, this is the truth. You said it in very simple words, very plain words, but words that hopefully our audience can fully understand as to the meaning of what it is that you just said. It is protection money. Easy, very simple to understand.
Yes.
And Saudi Arabia watched with great dismay the destruction of the United States by Iran
Yeah.
under
Yes,
50 years of
because
sanctions.
Saudis have been spending hundreds of billions of dollars on protection from the United States, and all these enormously expensive military equipment and weapon systems, and American military bases and their aircraft carrier strike groups, and all of this proved to be completely ineffective, almost as ineffective as it was expensive. And then when push came to shove, not only did the United States do nothing to protect Saudi Arabia, they actually moved weapon systems from Saudi Arabia to Israel, because they
Yes,
were like,
yes.
Israel is our precious
Darling.
friend and ally, and you guys can drown and die. As far as we're concerned, thank you very much for the business. And
Yes, yes,
it couldn't be more obvious. It couldn't be more obvious
yes,
that
yes, yes.
protection
And
racket
that's
is.
why it has. That's why it got accelerated. This was in talks and discussions, blah blah blah, for a long time, for almost 2 years. It didn't come about overnight, but then quickly it came about. Where when MBS realized that, oh my God, I'm sitting here naked, literally naked,
Yes.
and Pakistani troops are in Saudi Arabia. They occupy two bases. A squadron is there. JF-17 Thunders are there, and soon it will have Turkish capabilities. And Pakistan and
Um,
Turkey have been cooperating for a very long time.
Zulfikar, since when have Pakistani troops been in Saudi Arabia?
They have been actually stationed in Saudi Arabia going back to Zia's time, General Zia.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I didn't realize that because I know that they already signed a military cooperation pact in 2021 or 22. But
but
so
they go
this
back
goes
to
way
Zia's
back.
time. Yeah, they go back to Zia's time. But it was renewed just recently, like about maybe 3 months ago, and two bases, big bases, were emptied out with Pakistani, troops occupying those bases. Saudi Arabia knows that nobody in the Saudi air forces can fight or fly a plane. Nobody knows
They
that.
also, they also without the British and or Americans, they cannot maintain their aircraft because when they started the war on Yemen in 2015, they had something like 6,000 British engineers and mechanics who were brought into Saudi Arabia for the upkeep of the
Yeah,
aircraft that kept flying. They flew something like 20,000 uh, bombing raids against Yemen, and there's so much wear and tear that if you don't have spare parts being shipped in constantly and you don't have these engineers and mechanics fixing the aircraft, uh, their own estimate, these BAE, British military contractor, BAE engineers themselves said, well, if we weren't here, the Saudi war against Yemen couldn't last 3 weeks.
it was a disastrous war, disastrous for Saudi Arabia, and
Yes, but again, based on this whole corrupt system, Saudi Arabia was coerced to wage that war as a proxy for the Western Empire.
yes,
You don't want to do this for us? Well, how about we freeze your assets in the West? How about we run a color revolution against you? Did you see the Arab Spring? Would you like us to do this in your country as well? Would you like your head on a pike? You're a king. Nobody cares about you, really. And so, of course, they say like, yeah, sure, okay, fine. I'll take the silver, not the lead. Let's go to war. That's how the whole system is run all the time. Practically every war, you
yeah,
start analyzing. Ultimately, it gets back to the money and to the finance and to the uh, Western banking system. And when they say that all wars are bankers' wars, well, it turns out it's not an exaggeration.
exactly the case. Exactly the case. So somebody who was part of the system, somebody who was in finance, like yourself, I'm in the fintech part of it. So you and I have witnessed everything, Alex, just about everything. We make very unique, very very unique commentators because we have seen it all. I mean, almost everything.
Well, I think that anybody, if they had time to read and research and analyze, would inevitably converge on the same solutions because it's not too complicated. They make it complicated by layering all kinds of distractions and falsehoods and distortion over the system so that you cannot recognize it.
Yes,
And then they layer a few layers of ideology, where you're still going to find some people that believe in freedom and democracy and human rights, like supposedly that's what we're doing in all these resource rich nations. We like to bring them freedom and democracy out of the goodness of our hearts, of course. And so you'll find an audience for every one of these things, and the audience is usually too busy with their lives, making ends meet, putting their children to school, paying off their house and so forth. They don't have time to research. They get home dead tired from work. They switch on the TV, they eat their dinner, and the TV
feeds them nonsense.
feeds them nonsense. So of course, this might sound like we are analyzing something very unusual and complicated and esoteric and borderline conspiracy theories, but it's absolutely the scaffolding of the system. The facade looks nice, but the real layout is what we've just discussed here. And all you have to do is read their own documents, listen to their own speeches, interviews, lectures, uh, minutes of their meetings, their conferences, and it's all there. It's not even it's like hidden in plain sight. But thankfully for them, people are too busy struggling with their own lives to get to these conclusions. So hopefully, instead of watching TV, they will watch conversations like this and then move a step closer to the truth, which will
Well,
make us free. It's a step closer to the truth is a step closer to liberty, true liberty.
Well, this is the mission that I took on, Alex. This is the reason I am doing this, because I have a day job, very very busy. I have some health issues that take up a lot of my time. But I felt that this was my duty. Literally, I felt that this was my duty, and thankfully, I have received an extraordinary response from audiences all across the world, all across the globe, 14 languages. 6 million people have listened to us in less than 6 weeks, and and a large number of people show up every time you are in on our air. So I thank you, and I'm greatly honored to have you here, and look forward to having you here, on a regular basis. You bring wisdom, and the purpose is that we educate people who otherwise would be listening to propaganda, literally nothing but propaganda. And thankfully, a lot of them have moved away from that, and
Yes, yes.
and this is a great satisfaction to me. So thank you very much, our global audience. If you like what we do, please hit the like and subscribe button. Kindly go to Substack, become a paid member. That $5 a month will go a long way in supporting us. We will deliver all of this intelligence to you that comes from privileged sources directly into your mailbox. And we shall see you very soon again with our great friend and commentator who possesses great wisdom about matters that very few people understand, and that is Alex Krainer. So, Alex, please say the final word.
Well, thank you, Zulfikar. It's a privilege for me to join today and to be part of your program. Um, I think that what we're doing is probably important. I think that this beast that rules over us can only be killed by probably 100 million cuts, and hopefully we made a little cut today. But every one of those cuts is weakening the beast, and the more we know, the better we understand, the closer we go towards an emancipation and the change in the way human affairs are being run. Uh, we can leave the world a better place for our children in ways that are hard to even imagine. But believe you me, we would all be better off, not 10%, 50%, double, triple, maybe 10 times better off, living truly in prosperity and freedom. And so, this is, I think, why it's important that we continue doing what we're doing. Those of us who have time to research and analyze and speak, we do that. Those of you who don't, well, listen and speak to your friends and family, and so the message will percolate through the whole society, and we will come out. I think the only way we could be defeated in all this is if we chose to surrender, to capitulate. And I don't think we have the choice to do that because we have children and future generations to fight for.
Absolutely. We shall see you again. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you so much for your privilege that you give us, and the honor that we have to bring you here. Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.